guest is the author of The Physics of a Flying Saucer. Please welcome Ted Roach. Oh, welcome, Ted.
How are you?
Welcome. Well, that was real beam me up Teddy stuff.
It was, yes.
Now, we were talking about the physics of flying saucers, getting flying saucers around. Now, what is your theory on how a flying saucer getting from galaxies away to Earth, how would the physics work?
Well, we've got to understand that we come from a very primitive level in physics, and I've analysed the field that we're in, the gravitational field, as a time field caused by large number of little particles called gravitons, billions of gravitons radiating out from matter like light does. And when you analyse it as a time field, you then come to conclusions which are at a higher level than you do with Newtonian physics.
So getting here from light years away isn't done by physical movement, it's done by time?
That's right. You develop around the craft a time field very similar to the way light does when it comes from distant galaxies, and you can travel, you could go to the French Riviera for afternoon tea.
Now we're getting close. We're getting very close here.
If you understand the physics, you can then develop the craft.
How do you know?
Well, I've looked at the motion of the planets and analysed the planets using this physics. And it all fits in. It fits in with electric fields and magnetic fields, all as dimensional time fields. And there are a very large number of people who have now been calling me, doctors of science, who have called me saying that they are very, very interested in the physics. You
believe in flying saucers?
I do. When you look at the large number of galaxies there are in the universe, the Hubble Space Telescope analysed just a 5-cent area of the heavens, and they found 25 galaxies, each with around 100 to 200 billion stars in each one, and that's throughout the whole of the cosmos, then the chances of there being life elsewhere is astronomically high.
You've filed quite a few patents. Let's have a look at some of the inventions. The Jetsons light aircraft.
Yes.
How does that work?
Well, that's like a flying saucer, and what that does, it's very similar to the lens of a camera, which this graviton field, it refocuses the graviton field in the direction of where the craft wants to go, and the occupants of the craft, in fact, have no G-forces on them. And that's why these flying saucers can change direction with 100 Gs compared with our jet fighter pilots who can only withstand about 8 or 9.
What about the machine that identifies abnormal magnetic fields in the body?
Okay, well, I gave a lecture to the Physics Society at Sydney University a number of years ago, and the professor of medicine there said that I gave them a number of ideas, because when you look at magnetic fields as time fields, you can then understand that that cells, when they reproduce and break up, if they're in an abnormal time field, when they form, they then form cancers, and so we can look at cancers from that perspective of time fields. What
happened to your theories, your paperwork on flying saucers?
Well, when I put my patents in, I put one provisional patent with 10 inventions into the patent office. They were taken by the Australian Defence Department and the Australian Safeguards Office, and I have that in my book, the letter that I got back from them. And one of my daughters found this high-tech bug. I think I had it here somewhere. There it is there. That's a 5-cent piece. Let me just
pick this up. So you're saying you gave all this information for patents and the Defence Force confiscated it?
Well, and
bugged your house?
That's a security bug that the CIA, the Americans use, and the Australian security forces use.
So do you think the Australian Army or intelligence is actually space travelling as we speak?
No, but they are wanting to know. This is Star Wars physics. It's all Star Wars physics, and the Americans are spending trillions of dollars on Star Wars physics. The stealth bomber is part of it, and they're monitoring what everybody's doing, and I probably just happen to be one of those people.
So you believe have aliens visited us?
Well, in my book I explain Noah's Ark and what Ezekiel saw and a number of other things, and it would appear from the technology that we've been visited for a very, very long time. And when you take into account that some of the galaxies are over 1 billion years older than Earth, there's a high probability that we've been looked at just the same as we look at animals in national parks and things like that.
And when do you think I'd be able to get to Paris for afternoon tea?
Well, it all depends. If we can get the finance, there's trillions of dollars worth of inventions that we can develop, and the motor car and highways and traffic jams and pollution will all become redundant. So we've got to get into this Star Wars technology on a commercial basis and let the military look after their thing, but we need to start doing it so that we can have our afternoon tea on the French Riviera.
Sounding good to me. And if you'd like to know how you can do this and perhaps expand on your knowledge, it's called The Physics of a Flying Saucer. Fascinating to listen to your words. Thank you very much for joining us. Ted Roach, ladies and gentlemen. UFOs, a respected nuclear physicist and lecturer. He's been involved in investigations and the exposure of US government cover-ups for more than 38 years. Please welcome to Midday, Stanton Friedman. Welcome, Stanton.
Pleasure to be here.
Do you believe in UFOs?
No, that belief is for people in religion or politics, I guess. I'm a scientist who's been collecting data for 40 years, and I'm convinced the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft, that we're dealing with a cosmic Watergate, some few people in governments know, and that none of the arguments made against those conclusions by a small group of noisy negativists stand up under careful scrutiny, and we're dealing with the biggest story of the millennium. Visits to planet Earth by aliens and cover-up of the best data, bodies and wreckage, for 51 years. So belief has nothing to do with it. Evidence has everything to do with it.
You talk about evidence?
Yes.
What is it?
Well, in my lectures, I always start with 5 large-scale scientific studies, and I ask after each one, how many people have read this one? If I'm lucky, it's 2%. In England, 3 of 7 lectures, nobody had read any of them. So evidence should always be the place to start. That doesn't keep the noisy negativists from, doing their research by proclamation. There is no evidence. That's a lot easier to say than, oh, I didn't bother to look at it. One of the studies covers 3,200 sightings done for the United States Air Force. Over 600 could not be identified, separate from the ones for which there wasn't enough information. A quality evaluation showed the better the quality of the sighting, the more likely to be unexplainable. In other words, if you look at the characteristics of the best cases, clearly they're manufactured objects. I don't mean little blobs of light in the sky. That's not very useful. Whose behavior indicates they had to be made someplace other than Earth, because if we could make things that look like that and fly like that, up, down, back, forth, 10,000 miles an hour in the atmosphere, right-angle turns, without noise, exhaust, all that sort of stuff, we wouldn't be building F-16s, 17s, 18s, MiG-29s. What's important about a flying saucer is the technology. They can fly circles around anything we got flying. If it wasn't built here, it was built someplace else.
But the evidence?
Well, we have eyewitness testimony. We have over 5,000 physical trace cases from 65 countries, and they're dull after the first 200. These are where people see saucers on or near the ground, and after the saucer leaves, one finds physical changes. And you can compare that dirt, if you will, or vegetation with nearby dirt and see differences that you cannot explain other than by some very exciting sort of things happening. 1,000 of those cases involve reports of beings associated with the craft. We have 3,500 pilot sightings collected by a retired NASA scientist, Dr. Richard Haynes. 45 countries, and they're dull again. The same thing is happening all over the world by people you trust with your lives when you fly in airplanes.
But if so many visitations have happened, and as you say so many pilots have gone, oh, don't know what that is, there's a UFO, why don't we know about it? Why don't they introduce themselves?
I don't talk to the squirrels in my backyard. We don't know that they haven't introduced themselves. There are all kinds of stories floating around about, for example, a saucer landing in Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico in 1964. Aliens getting out, military guys going over, shaking hands, and walking off together. I've talked to 2 people who claim to have seen the footage shot of that event. I haven't seen it. So we don't know what the government knows. But clearly the aliens' purpose in coming here is not to appear on talk shows, not to land on a White House lawn. They're here for their own purposes.
You were one of the original civilian investigators of the Roswell.
The civilian original investigator. Yes.
Investigator. What happened at Roswell?
Well, condensing 20 years of study, and I've been working on it that long, which seems utterly ridiculous for one case. As far as I'm concerned, 2 alien spacecraft had a mid-air collision, demolishing one, exploding into little pieces, debris coming down 85 miles northwest of Roswell. The other one almost intact, but with a big gash in the side, coming down 100 miles west of there. Both were found. New Mexico is a very lightly inhabited place, almost as bad as Australia. There aren't many people around. The first one, a rancher found this wreckage. He reported to the sheriff a few days later. Military go out, grab everything. The cover story goes out. There was headlines, major headlines. Army captures flying saucer. That was in the newspapers. There we go. That's Roswell Army Airfield, not Royal Australian Air Force.
As the investigator, did you see the spacecraft?
I didn't get involved until 1978. This happened in 1947, but I've talked to a lot of the top military people who were involved. Remember, the military group involved here, and balloons are, everybody throws, must have been a balloon. It wasn't a balloon. Crash test dummies, that's one of the silliest explanations for this reason. They did drop crash test dummies in New Mexico, but not until after 1953. This happened in 47, and they were all the size of pilots, 6 feet tall, 175 pounds, and nobody who described the bodies said anything other than little guys, skinny little guys, big head, no ears, no crash test dummy.
So all the people you've spoken to read the Roswell incident, say it did happen, but the government said it didn't happen.
Well,
we didn't see that alien footage. We've seen, you know, the famous bit of footage about the autopsy.
Yeah, I've met with the exploiter of the film. False. Putting everything he told me in our first conversation was a lie. I mean, except for that little bad start, you know, and it was downhill from there. I can't tell you who made it, but there's certainly no reason to relate that to Roswell.
Do you believe there have been alien abductions?
Yes. I've worked with some of the top investigators of abductions who collectively looked at over 1,000 cases. I'm convinced a number of Earthlings have indeed been abducted, but every case has to be taken on its own merits. This document you bought, you retrieved from the CIA? Well, it's a long, tortured procedure to get documents in the United States. You file a request, they turn you down, you appeal, they turn you down again, sometimes you go to court, sometimes not. This document took me 5 years to get. It's a released CIA UFO document on which you can read 8 words, not very useful words, you'll notice, info location, info date, USSR, and a bunch of numbers. Even the security markings are not there. This is what happens under freedom of information. National security is a reason for withholding information. Of course, they say there's nothing classified about UFOs. Well, except for all those classified documents you can't get. Fascinating. You don't think people think you're out there? No, I'll tell you, I've given over 700 lectures all over the world, 14 countries. And I judge by the questions at the end of the lecture. I've had 11 hecklers and 700 lectures. You get that many if you talk about religion, sports, politics, show business, whatever. So the response from my professional colleagues is what I value the most, and they've been uniformly good. Well, if you'd like to catch Stanton Friedman on his Australian lecture tour, you may have the opportunity to ask a question, which I believe you open the floor. Oh, yeah. UFOs are real. There's a telephone number on your screen, 03 98 74 23 44, and you'd be able to get some information otherwise not available. We thank you very much for your report. 11 cities. I'm going to see the country like I've never seen it before. Good on you. Well, we do appreciate your time on Midday. Thanks for having me. Stanton Friedman, ladies and gentlemen. That's not Royal Australian Air Force. That's Roswell Army Airfield captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. That's July 8th, 1947. It made it in newspapers from Chicago West. Within 6 hours, thumbs down. The Air Force said, sorry, it's just a radar reflector from a weather balloon. That was explanation number 2.
Oh, so that's hence this headline here.
Well, you notice the second line on that. Army finds flying saucer. Oh, General believes it is radar weather gadget. By the next day, it was General empties Roswell saucer, and until I got involved, that was 47.
Right.
In 1978, the story was dead in the doornail.
Right. And you lucked into this, didn't you? You went to a radio station for an interview.
It was in a television station, and the station manager is embarrassed because one of his reporters was late. I'd already done 2 interviews. And out of the blue, he says, the guy you ought to talk to is Jesse Marcel. Brilliant investigator that I am. I said, who's he?
Right.
He says, oh, he's a military guy who handled one of the pieces of the wreckage of one of the flying saucers you were interested in when he was in the service. That got me intrigued. That got me started. I got other stories, and a colleague and I talked to 62 people by 1980. It was 92 people by 1985.
Right.
The number's well over 200 now. The government grabbed the bodies, intimidated the people. Lord knows how much they've learned. New Mexico is a place where more classified work was done than any other state. easiest
Right.
place to
Okay,
carry something,
I'm with
to
you
cover
now.
something
Yeah.
up.
So that's why the UFOs could have been there in the first place, because it was a strategic...
It was the only place in the world where you could study the 3 areas of technology that showed that soon Earthlings would be moving out. Nuclear weapons, powerful V-2 rockets.
That's this Area 51 that's
No,
next
that's
up.
over in Nevada. That's another
Okay,
place.
all right.
Yeah, there are all kinds of crazy stuff going on there. But New Mexico was where the first nuclear weapon was tested. Mm-hmm. And where the first rockets were tested.
And all the Star Wars technology as
Yeah,
well.
and Area 51 had all these crazy systems. And anybody who thinks we know all that's going on out there is wrong. Governments can keep secrets. The Director of Central Intelligence admitted for the first time ever that his annual budget in 1996 was only $26.6 billion U.S. Black budget, nobody knows what it goes for. That's CIA, NSA, DIA, NRO, alphabet soup kind of stuff.
Right.
That's an awful lot of money that you can cover up, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is. You've not seen any. You're not seen any UFOs yourself.
No, I've never seen a flying saucer or an alien.
Right.
My lectures, UFOs are real, but flying saucer, aliens, call it what you want. But I've talked, at the end of every lecture, I ask my audiences, typically 10% believe they've seen one. How many of you reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down.
Right.
Anybody left? I said, were you in the military at the time? I get some great stories.
So, Mr. Friedman, g'day.
Yes?
If naked aliens landed here, how would we know what not to look at?
Very more thoughtful than most of the questions from the debunkers, frankly.
Yes. Well, there's now this talking about debunking. You debunked this. This is footage that someone came up with, supposedly from the Roswell incident.
Well,
an
originally
alien,
they
supposedly?
said Roswell. Then as soon as it was clear that this didn't match Roswell, oh, sorry, this so-called cameraman says it was over near Socorro, 175 miles away, and a month earlier. Roswell, they said 4 long fingers, no thumb.
Yeah.
There were 6 there, if you noticed.
Oh, I did count.
Skinny little guys, and no ears, just the big eyes. Nothing like that creature there. I'll give that film credit for one thing, though. It was shown in about 40 countries. Mm-hmm. It caused more discussion about flying saucers than anything else that happened in 10 years. I debated at Oxford University, and won, incidentally.
You did?
Because of that. Yeah. This house believes that intelligent alien life has visited planet Earth. We got 60% of the vote.
Do you think in your lifetime that the American government or internationally that the subject's going to open up and we'll actually find out, yes, we have been visited and these are the people?
Oh, yeah.
Or...
Yeah, already last year in England, a show called Strange But True took a survey in the middle of a debate about UFOs. And 100,000 people called in response to the question, do you think aliens have visited Earth? 92% said yes. So we're heading in the right direction. I'm an optimist. Yeah, I think some young reporter in the States will want a Pulitzer Prize. There's one here for the having if he comes to people like me to get started. Yeah, I'm very much an optimist. Before I leave this, shuffle off this old coil, I think we will hear the truth about flying saucers.
You could become the Cosmos Watergate reporter. If there is indeed a
there is a cosmic Watergate. There's no. I'm actually working on a documentary now called The Cosmic Cover-Up. Mm-hmm. I wish I had it ready so I could take it with me on this lecture tour around the country, but I don't yet. So.
And that lecture tour is called UFOs Are Real? You're travelling around Australia at the moment?
11 major venues.
Right.
And I mean major, Brisbane and Gold Coast and Darwin and Perth and Melbourne, Dallas Auditorium, Dallas
Very
Brooks
good on your
Auditorium.
geography.
Yeah, and Hobart and Launceston, which I'd never heard of before, sorry, and Newcastle and Canberra and Adelaide. I'm going to see the country like I've never seen it.
Well, if you want to go along, I mean, look for the dates. Stanton is going to be here for a while in Australia, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't leave until the 30th. Of August.
Oh, you're doing all that stuff in that time? It's pretty,
Plus, I've already done 17 interviews, and I think they got me lined up for 17 more.
Well, I hope you're not plucked up by a UFO before you actually finish the tour.
I wish they would fly me home, though. It'd be a lot faster.
They might. You know more about them than anyone else does. Thank you very much for coming. I'm sure we could talk about it forever, but we have to be up here at 8:30. But thank you. Stanton Friedman. And over.